Okay, here we go. Here's the next video. And this is kind of turning into an after-action report, although that's really not my intent. But I'm going to go through just the first couple turns here just to give you some insight into the game. But I promise this won't become a turn-by-turn after-action report. You can see the Italian army here, right there in the middle, has moved up and down the line here and formed kind of a defensive front against the Russians as they were just beginning to encroach Slovenia here. And the Russians get their turn still, so they haven't moved. But basically what has happened is the Italians have moved along the roads in this area, and they've managed to do a good job of getting into position because most of the Italian units are pretty nimble, and they've made good use of the lateral roads here, and they've kind of established a nice little defensive position here before the Russians could really get going. And there's nothing that can be done about that. The Russians, they've moved as fast as they could to get into the area, and the Italians, of course, being allowed by the rules to enter Yugoslavia because the Russians did so first, the Italians have established kind of a hedgehog here, and the Russians have to break through this. So what's most interesting, though, is that the game allows for the variable arrival of American units. And you never know when the Americans might arrive. The scariest thing that the Americans bring is the Navy air units. And they've got some pretty good quality ratings, the F-18s and F-14s and things like that. And that gives the Russian player a lot of headaches. You never know when they're going to arrive, and you never know in what quantities that they're going to arrive. However, the Russians can safely assume that they generally won't arrive before turn 2. As a matter of fact, it's actually impossible because you have to roll below the current turn number, so you can't roll below turn 1 on turn 1. However, the Allied player got lucky. As you can see right here, we've got some Marines that showed up, and I decided to put these Marines, you can land them on any coastal hex. I decided to drop these Marines right here because you got this Russian army coming down this road, and this Russian army consists of, there's the Air Mobile Brigade, we've got some Spetsnaz, and we've got a full tank division, and we've got a motorized division there. So the Russians are clearly trying to come along this road and come through here and hit the flank. Of course, they want to break into this area over here, and there you can see there's what the game refers to as a munitions target. This is munition target Q, just right there outside of Trieste. And if we come down here, you can see that, what does this mean here? 3 dice. That means that if the Russians can successfully capture this hex, Q, that means they get to roll 3 dice as victory points. And that's pretty good. As a matter of fact, you'll notice down here we've got munitions target Z, and on the first turn the Russians managed to bomb this. It was a little risky, but they pulled it off, and they're going to be entitled to 4 dice for victory points. And so that put the hurt on the Allied player, and the Allies certainly don't want to let the Russians get a hold of Q. So anyway, let me kind of repair things here. There we go. So what happened is the Americans showed up. The Allied player got lucky. Both these Marine divisions, plus brigades rather, actually that's a battalion, and a Marine Expeditionary Brigade there, plus some Cobras showed up, and I decided that I was going to drop them right there, right in front of this Russian advance that was coming along this way. And it's a little risky because there's a lot of firepower in there, and I could end up getting these guys wiped out. There are some Italian artillery pieces in there, so that's going to augment the Marines a little bit. But it's risky because I don't have a lot of support for these Marines, and the Russians could come in here and slam right into them and wipe them out if they get a good roll. But you know what? That's the Marines' job. That's what they're for, and that's exactly what I did with them. I stuck them right in front of the Russians, right in their face. So we'll see what this Russian force does. But I guess I'll have to do another video, won't I? Because we got to see how this turns out. So anyway, I digress. You can kind of see how the game is evolving, and we got a real battle here. There's not a lot of Warsaw Pact units. There are more kind of showing up from Hungary, and there's more reinforcements. Not a lot. So you can see that the Warsaw Pact player is really pretty significantly outnumbered in terms of actual chits. The thing is, though, is that these Italian units are not particularly strong, and the Russians, they've got a little bit of punch here. You know, you've got, as I pointed out, we've got a tank division, we've got a motorized division, and you know, that they're wielding 5 and 4 strength attacks by themselves. So, you know, they'll be able to hold their own. The difficulty for the Soviets is that they got to fight through all this insidious terrain, and that's what's really going to be a challenge. So, but that's the situation on the land. Let me direct your attention over here. And what we've got going on here is we've got a lot of airstrikes. Now, the Soviets, as I mentioned in the other video, they outnumber the Allies in the air pretty significantly. And however, as the game goes on, those American carrier air units show up. They'll show up eventually, and they're pretty powerful. So, you know, matter of fact, I'll go ahead and grab one, and we'll take a look at it. Here you can see an F-14, and it's got a quality rating of 3, and the best Soviet air unit has a quality rating of 2. I think we can find one right there. And that may not seem like a big difference, but remember, in this game, the Allies are rolling 2 6-sided dice, and the Soviets are rolling 1 10-sided die. So any time that the Allies have parity in terms of quality, the Russians are probably going to lose. It's almost certain that the Russians will lose if the Allies have better quality rated air units. So, but the American air units haven't shown up yet, and as such, what I'm doing with the Russian player, and you can take this as a tactical hint, by the way, what the Russians are trying to do here is they have sortied an enormous airstrike against all these different munition targets all across the map, and they're going to try to hit as many of these as possible while they've got an opportunity to do so, and that is to say, while the Italian Air Force is relatively weak. The Italians got a couple air units shot down on turn 1, as did the Russians, but the Russians have a lot more air units, so they can afford a couple losses. The Italian Air Force is down to not even a half a dozen air units. We've got a tornado unit there, and we've got a couple units in there, another tornado unit, and that might be just about it. So what the Russian player is doing, that's moi, what the Russian player is doing is we're stretching the Italian Air Force. We've got too many targets that we're trying to hit all throughout this region of the map, and the Italian player, that's also moi, won't be able to intercept them all. So some of these targets are going to get hit, and the Russian player wants to do this before the American air units get in the game, because they really will, they'll change the whole situation in terms of air supremacy. So we're going to see how that works out. Some of these munition targets will probably get hit. We might get hit by a few SAMs. We might miss some of these targets. We might get some air units shot down. We also might shoot down some Italian air units. So you know, that's a pretty significant advantage for the Russians. But they better do it now, because once the American air units get in, contesting air superiority is going to be very difficult. And of course, that's going to completely change the situation over here, because if the Russians do not have air superiority for the land war, forget about it. There's no way that they're going to be able to punch through these Italian units with the terrain that they got to fight over and everything like that. So, all right, there you go. There's another video. This one wasn't quite as long as the other one, so I'll at least do one more just to kind of show you how that turned out, and we'll do a little summary of that. But this is just a little bit of a taste of how the game works and some of the finer strategies that you have to consider. And after I finish playtesting this game, I'll do at least one more video, and we'll talk about how it all went and my observations and things like that, and we'll just see how the whole thing ended up.